For decades, Palestinians in Gaza have strived for recognition beyond the headlines of conflict. Yet their reality is a deepening humanitarian crisis. Nearly 80% of Gaza's 2.3 million residents relied on international aid, with unemployment surpassing 50%. Trapped in just 365 square kilometers, Gaza has been under a 17-year siege, making everyday life increasingly unbearable.
There is general anxiety. Everybody is worried. As you can see, only a few people are on these streets. They certainly feel that a war is coming. There is tension, whether here or among the Jews. It is the same feeling of fear.
This struggle is reflected in the occupied West Bank, where more than 3 million Palestinians live under Israeli control. Checkpoints restrict movement, while the expansion of settlements by more than 700,000 Israeli settlers further erodes the prospects for a Palestinian state. Palestinians face constant threats at military checkpoints and from settler violence as they try to hold onto their land under occupation. Raids on Al-Aqsa, one of the holiest sites for Palestinians, only add to the tension.
This occupation closes the crossings, prevents the entry of fuel to the power station. It prevents fishermen from reaching deep in the sea so that they can provide a livelihood for their children. This occupation prevents Palestinians from receiving international grants and punishes every Palestinian citizen living in the Gaza Strip.
On October 7, 2023, the war began with a sudden and unprecedented escalation. Hamas members, along with other armed factions, breached the Israeli border, launching rockets in a coordinated attack that would soon lead to chaos.
It was a moment that no one could have fully anticipated.
For years, Gaza had been the epicenter of tensions between Palestinian resistance groups and Israel, but never before had such an organized attack been carried out with such precision and force.
We are on the verge of a great victory and a clear conquest on the Gaza front. Enough is enough. The cycle of intifadas and revolution in the battle to liberate our land and prisoners languishing in Israeli prisons must be completed.
Hamas linked its October 7 attack to decades of occupation, settlement expansion, and the blockade of Gaza. It described the attack as a response aimed at reclaiming Palestinian rights and seeking liberation from ongoing oppression. For many Palestinians, October 7 was not just an attack, but a desperate attempt to escape what they see as an open-air prison. In the hours that followed, the scale of the violence became clear. What started as a cross-border incursion quickly escalated into full-blown war, engulfing Gaza in a relentless storm of airstrikes and retaliatory bombardments that would leave the enclave in ruins.
I just want to make sure you are... Okay. Nizar, please take cover. Please take cover and continue if you feel it's safe.
We are at war. In war, one needs to be level-headed. I call on all citizens of Israel to unite in order to achieve our highest goal, victory in this war.
Why was this baby killed? Was he a resistance fighter? He is 1 day old and he doesn't even have a birth certificate yet. Allah is sufficient.
For the third day on a row, the exchange of fire between Hamas and Israel is still continuing. Israel is still intensifying their air raids all over the Gazan enclave, targeting houses and buildings.
In this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel.
In those early hours, the fate of Gaza was sealed. Thousands were forced to flee, many losing their homes and loved ones in the process. The sense of uncertainty was overwhelming, and for many, there was no escape from the relentless violence that followed. The war had only just begun, but the human cost was already staggering.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules. International humanitarian law and human rights law must be respected and upheld.
On October 13, 2023, the first mass evacuation order came. Israel directed residents in Gaza City and the north to relocate south, beyond the Gaza Valley. But this was only the beginning. As the airstrikes intensified, Gaza's infrastructure buckled, hospitals became overwhelmed, food and water grew scarce, and more than 1 million people were forced to flee their homes. This marked the beginning of one of Gaza's most heartbreaking humanitarian crises, where survival became a daily battle for over 1 million displaced people.
We sleep in the street, no shelter, no food, no water, no nothing. There is no hope that anyone will help us. Only God can now.
With hospitals destroyed and supplies running out, people in Gaza were left to endure unimaginable hardships. The world watched, but for those on the ground, hope seemed to disappear.
We left our clothes and basic needs behind us. Our children and the elderly people are suffering. The Israelis are targeting us from place to another. We have no place to seek shelter. We have no food or water. We have no blankets. We have no clothes to keep us warm.
We moved to Khan Yunis thinking it to be a safe place. We were also warned by Israeli leaflets to move again. We moved to reach Rafah, where we are huddled in small houses. We are witnessing a new Nakba, like the Nakba of 1948. However, Palestinians found people to take care of them in 1948. But nowadays, no one is turning their attention to us. We are in extremely dire living conditions.
As the international community grappled with the scale of devastation, calls for accountability grew louder, leading to a historic legal battle in The Hague. December 2023, South Africa initiates a case against Israel at the ICJ, accusing it of war crimes and genocide in Gaza. The case invokes the Genocide Convention. January 2024, the ICJ accepts the jurisdiction and mandates Israel to cease military attacks in Rafah and ensure humanitarian access. May 2024, as the conflict rages, the ICJ reiterates its orders condemning the ongoing destruction and rising civilian deaths. 2004, the ICJ rules that Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, including occupied East Jerusalem, are illegal under international law. The ICC continues investigating suspected war crimes in Gaza and occupied West Bank, focusing on individuals responsible for violations of humanitarian law. ICJ rulings are legally binding, but their enforcement hinges on international diplomatic pressure. Potential action from the UN Security Council may arise if Israel does not comply.
By 11 votes to 4, is of the opinion that the state of Israel's continued presence in the occupied territory is unlawful.
The court considers that this presence constitutes an unlawful act which engages the international responsibility of this state. This is a continuing wrongful act that was caused by the violation of the inadmissibility of territory by force and the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people that Israel committed through its policies and practices. As a result, the latter has the obligation to end its presence in the occupied Palestinian territories as quickly as possible.
The criminal behind this war, besides the occupying state, is the US administration, which should also be brought before the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court.
While the case is ongoing, its potential to set a precedent for future conflicts is significant. But for the people of Gaza, justice has always felt out of reach. As of June 2024, 146 countries have officially recognized the State of Palestine, including recent additions like Spain, Ireland, Norway, and Slovenia. Despite this growing international recognition, the situation on the ground remains largely unchanged for Palestinians. Diplomatic and political roadblocks continue to hinder peace efforts, and the realities of occupation and conflict persist, limiting the impact of these recognitions in achieving tangible improvements for Palestinians. The ceasefire talks in Gaza, held in Doha and Cairo, have faced repeated setbacks, with little progress despite ongoing mediation efforts. The United States has stressed the urgency of resolving the situation, highlighting that hostages remain at risk while the humanitarian crisis deepens. But Hamas has accused the US of being complicit in the killing of Palestinians and criticized Washington for not exerting enough pressure on Israel.
Time is of the essence. Time is of the essence because with every passing day, the well-being and lives of the hostages are in jeopardy.
The negotiations have stalled primarily due to sharp disagreements over key strategic areas, most notably the Philadelphia corridor along the Gaza-Egypt border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly altered or rejected proposals from mediators, insisting that Israeli troops remain stationed in critical areas of Gaza, particularly around the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing. Netanyahu asserts that maintaining control over these areas is crucial to prevent the alleged smuggling of weapons and hostages, framing it as a non-negotiable security issue.
3 of these goals go through one place, the Philadelphia corridor. By the way, this prevents the smuggling of hostages above the ground. Hamas can take them, smuggle them in these 42 days, smuggle them to the Sinai. It's a distance of a few meters. They cross the fence and they disappear. They can then appear in Iran or Yemen. No way.
On the other hand, Hamas has constantly demanded a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, including from the Philadelphia corridor, alongside calls for humanitarian aid and reconstruction as preconditions for any ceasefire agreement.
Any agreement must include a complete cessation of aggression against our Palestinian people, full withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, including the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing, the return of displaced to their homes freely and without any hindrance or inspection, humanitarian relief for our people, and the reconstruction of what the occupation has destroyed to finally reach a serious and genuine prisoner swap deal.
As the conflict escalated, the Hamas leadership became a target. The deaths of senior figures like Ismail Haniyeh transformed the organization's leadership structure, leaving a significant impact on the conflict and the broader region. Yahya Sinwar, the man Israel holds responsible for the October 7 attacks, now leads the group.
We will fight for the goals of the Palestinian people. We will be with the Palestinian people in the struggle for the Great March of Return and freedom.
After the assassination of the martyr leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Iran finds itself obliged to respond, and the enemy is waiting in a great state of dread and confusion.
In late September 2024, Israel escalated its attacks in Lebanon with the targeted killing of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah during an airstrike on Beirut. Nasrallah's death on September 27 marked a pivotal moment in the conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the strike a historic turning point, while Hezbollah and its backers, including Iran, vowed retaliation.
These reports over the last 48 hours certainly don't help with the temperature going down. I'm not going to be Pollyannish about it. We're obviously concerned about escalation.
Around the world, hundreds of protests continue to demand an end to the war in Gaza and push for an urgent ceasefire. In the US, Demonstrators rallied against Netanyahu's visit to Congress and condemned ongoing U.S. military aid to Israel.
So I think we need a permanent and immediate ceasefire. Netanyahu needs to be arrested, and adequate humanitarian aid needs to go into Palestine. So I don't support any of this, and I find it offensive that my hard-earned money is being used to fund this. I think that's unacceptable.
Protests also erupted across Europe, urging governments to halt arms shipments and prioritize peace efforts. While these demonstrations have yet to stop the violence in Gaza, they have led some countries to reconsider their arms deals, offering symbolic support to Palestinians and amplifying calls for international intervention.
I'm here because there is nothing else I can do. I feel powerless about the awful situation in Gaza and the West Bank. I know the West Bank very well. I've got lots of friends there, and what they are going through at the moment is quite abominable. And nobody seems to be doing anything or saying anything to stop it. So I'm here with my family because there's nothing else I can do but protest.
There is a lot of pressure for a ceasefire. There are negotiations taking place. They are endless. I'm still hopeful, but the testimony I have is that it will be very difficult to have an agreement. And so obviously the physical control of the situation on the ground is in the hands of Israel.
The war sent shockwaves across the globe. Protests filled major cities, and leaders from every corner of the world condemned the violence. Despite numerous efforts by the United Nations and other diplomatic channels, a lasting ceasefire remains elusive.
Not only are children dying in Gaza, but also the United Nations system. The truth is dying. The values that the West claims to defend are dying. The hopes of humanity to live in a more just world are dying one by one.
While ceasefire talks continue, the path to lasting peace is still filled with obstacles. And after a year of destruction, it could take decades for Gaza to rebuild.
We are back in the 80s almost for Gaza. So all the investments in human development in the Palestinian territories in the last 20 years and in Gaza in the last 40 years have been wiped out. Our main concern is to be ready on any possible day after, to bring in, at least as I said, the temporary shelters and all the other necessary basic services with them. And in our assessment, this will cost between $2 to $3 billion in the first 3 years.
In the days following Nasrallah's assassination, Israel launched a ground offensive in southern Lebanon, targeting what it claims to be Hezbollah's military infrastructure. The incursion has led to a high number of casualties and widespread displacement among Lebanese people. Israeli forces have also been conducting airstrikes as they seek to dismantle Hezbollah's command and missile systems. Despite the intensity of the fighting, the potential for further escalation looms, with concerns that Hezbollah, although weakened, may still retaliate.
The Lebanese people are now being subjected to a war of genocide, and Israel must stop the war in Lebanon and in Palestine. We condemn this aggression, and we demand that it stops immediately. Stop this crime. Stop it now. Stop killing children and women.
We hope to return to our homes even if they are destroyed. Here we feel like strangers. We hope to return to our homes even if they are destroyed.
I'm living in a tent with my family, in-laws and other relatives, all of us in a single tent. Return us to our homes in the north. We will go back to our homes even if we are forced to live in a makeshift tent.
We hope to return to Gaza with dignity as soon as possible, and that the countries intervene to reach a ceasefire. Even if our homes are destroyed, we will return and live in tents on the rubble. It doesn't matter.
1 year on from October 7, the war continues to devastate Gaza and now Lebanon. And as the destruction shatters cities and displaces families, hopes for peace fade with each passing day.